Greetings and welcome to yet another analysis from the Skilling Open in the Champions Chess Tour. Today we have an amazing game at our hands, and that is Sergei Karjakin against Magnus Carlsen, the world champion himself. Let's just jump right into it. It was a very interesting game. Let's take a look. e4, e5, knight f3, and already right off the bat we have a surprising move from the champion. He plays d6, which is known as the Philidor, but it's kind of known as the bad Philidor. The good Philidor is to play d6 first, and then knight f6, followed by e5 here, which is better than the bad Philidor, which Magnus played after e5, knight f3, d6. The way to exploit this is d4, take 6, knight f6, knight c3, and I should mention very briefly that in this position, e takes d4 is pretty much the only move. If you play something like knight d7, that can quickly be met by bishop c4, and you already have tons of tricks to watch out for. For example, if you play bishop e7, you can take on e5, and after d takes d5, queen d5 is winning. Another move here is after knight f6, one can take on e5. And this is also completely winning, because after knight takes e5, knight takes e5, d takes e5, we have this very nice move, bishop takes f7. So a nice trap there to keep in mind. And I can also mention that after d takes e5, we have this move, knight g5. The difference in the previous line is that here, if you were going to play knight g5 here, black can play d5. So that is my very short opening lesson for you guys. So e takes d4 kind of has to be played. Knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, bishop e7. And here, g3. And this is a move I really like, because this makes things very easy for white. It's very simple. I'm simply going to play bishop g2, castle. Whenever black plays c6 and wants to play b5, I will play a4. And even e5. In some cases, and I'm just going to castle h3, g4, put my knight on g3, maybe start pushing f4 eventually, and that's kind of what happens. So castles, bishop g2, rook e8, castles, bishop f8. Here we see yet another advantage for the bishop on g2, perfectly protecting the pawn on e4. h3, this is the move I mentioned. White wants to push g4 and also prevent bishop g4. Knight bd7, and there we go. g4 is on the board. Knight c5, attacking the pawn, but we simply protect it with rook e1. And this is a very nice position for white. It's very simple to play white, as I did say, and it's unpleasant for black. So Magnus chose to play c6. He wants to push either for d5 in the future, or potentially b5, in order to expand on the queen side. g5 from Karjakin, moving the knight to d7. That's the only square. f4, taking even more space. It's a very strong move, taking the e5 square away from the knight, and also preparing some knight f5 here. And also bishop e3, queen d2, rook d1 is going to come and applying more pressure on d6. So a5, bishop e3, queen c7, and a4. This is another move I mentioned. We now prevent black from playing b5. This would make things slightly harder for white if black could play b5 and b4. Chasing away the knight on c3, which perfectly protects the pawn on e4. So a4 is a very good move. Very typical in these positions, as I did say earlier as well. And knight a6. And queen d2, very simple chess from Karjakin, and very instructive as well, so you should pay attention to it. Knight c5, rook d1, again taking the open file, applying more pressure on d6 eventually. So white is already doing extremely well, perfectly played so far by Sergei here. Bishop d7 from Magnus, knight e2 from Sergei. He now wants to maneuver his knight to g3 and potentially play f5 and bishop f4, putting pressure on d6. Rook d8, knight g3, queen c8, attacking the pawn on h3. I can't really see any other moves here. Maybe d5 could work. It is certainly always a possibility when the rook is hitting the queen here, but the question is that if it works, if I can do something like this, and this does not look very good, but it's always an idea to look out for. But I'm sure Magnus didn't like it, so that's why I played queen c8. King h2 from Karjakin. Very simple. d5, there we go. But now e5 is good. So knight b4. Black is trying to put some pressure here on c2, and he's trying desperately to get some activity because his pieces are not too well placed. Queen f2 attacking the knight. b6. Bishop d4. Now Karjakin is preparing for f5, e6 potentially, even g6, f6. Just going to attack the king. So Magnus, he prevents that with bishop f5. He's also attacking the c2. That pawn needs to be protected. g6. This pawn also stops any sort of f5 nonsense. Knight takes f5. Queen takes f5. h4. A logical move in order to give the h3 square to the bishop, but it's not the best move. And this is where Magnus is good. He always spots whenever he gets a chance. He always spots it, and this is what he does again with a knight e6. And the tactic is that if you play bishop takes b6, knight takes f4 is very, very dangerous, and this is just a complete mess. But here Black has tremendous compensation. He is now threatening the rook, and something like rook e4 needs to happen, and this is a complete mess. But Karjakin, he played rook f1. He did not take on b6. c5, bishop e3, d4. And here, the only move that leads to a very complicated position. Like probably every move leads to a complicated position, but the only move that leads to better position for white is bishop h3, trapping the queen. The queen is officially trapped, and Magnus decided to take on c2 here with the queen. Perhaps knight takes f4 is better. After bishop takes f5, knight takes e2, knight takes e2, g takes f5. The position is very complex. Rook takes f5 maybe, knight takes c2. I wouldn't like being white here, but all of a sudden you have tactics like g6 takes and h5, and if this works, it could be white could be doing well. But it's always quite obnoxious when Black has a lot of pieces and you have the queen and your king is weak and everything. The computer can say whatever he wants, but practically this is certainly not very simple. Let's take a look. Queen takes c2, rook takes c2, knight takes c2, and here Karjakin played f5, which is not the best move, but it's still a very logical move. Trying to open up a little bit. Maybe a better move would have been to play bishop g4. The point is that you prevent Black from playing e2 here. You get some nice control on e2, while you can also push for h5 later. And also knight e4 is in the air. f5 was on the board, and here Magnus makes an error with rook d2. A better move would have been to play knight e4, where again e2 is an idea, but also rook takes e5 is now all of a sudden possible. And for example, if I'm going to play bishop g4 now, rook takes e5 would work, because if we take, we can now play bishop d6. That's another downside of the f5 move. But Magnus, he missed his chance, unfortunately. He played rook d2, unfortunately for him. King h1. G takes f5, bishop takes f5, e2, and here Karjakin plays the very good move, knight takes e2. Simply take the pawn. Because after rook takes e2, we have bishop takes e6, rook takes e6, queen f3, attacking both on f7 and the rook on e2. So Black needs to play rook e7, queen takes e2, knight e4, queen c4. There's a lot of pressure right now. Knight c6, queen b5, knight takes c5, queen takes b6. These pawns are now weak, but Magnus always finds a way to fight. Knight c4, queen b8, rook e4, attack in h4, rook f4 protecting, takes, Knight takes b2, h5. And this position, this endgame, is very complicated. It's certainly not so simple to win. But let's see what Karjakin did. Queen d4, knight takes a4, queen takes c4. Now we have a pin on the pawn of f7. This is quite important. Knight c5, and now g6. So h takes, knight e6. Karjakin is left with only one pawn on the board. And after queen d5, Magnus played the error a4 and lost after queen f5, knight e8, queen d7, and you cannot protect f7 and the knight simultaneously, and Magnus resigned because the endgame with queen against the minor piece is completely lost. The question is that if he played bishop e7, queen f5, and then something like knight e5, is this winning or is it losing? That is the question. And I'm not sure myself. I think I'll put my king on e8 here as white. But this setup here is usually quite ideal. But you need to get it in the right place. So it's certainly not simple. And a continuation could be king g2, king g7, takes, queen takes a5, and should probably be winning for white, especially practically, but you never know. So that was that game. A very, very instructive game by Karjakin. He played extremely, extremely well in the opening slash middle game, but of course Magnus, as always, he gets some chances, and he did have his chance. His chance would have been to play knight e4 in this position with a complete mess. But of course, the opening he chose is rather risky. But he's doing well in the tournament. He has the second place behind Anish Giri. And this was an extremely important win for Karjakin, who now has 4.5 points, I believe, and he is trailing. Only 1 point behind, so if he finishes strong tomorrow, he will be doing well. And could be set for the knockout stages. That was a hard word to say. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay tuned for more action coming soon.